Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Radha McBetterton Willis, your host. Today we have the most special guest in the country right now. We're talking about Representative Senfronia Thompson, the Dean of the
Texas House.
Someone that has been there for over 50 years and knows exactly how the system works. Representative, thank you so kindly for spending this time with Politics Done Right.
I am delighted to be on your show.
Well, let me tell you something. This is important because I don't know if America knows the severity of what we're talking about. And having you as the leader in this motion, I think is quite important. So what I'd like you to do for us is explain to America exactly what is happening in Texas, because I think they just think it's a voting thing that affects just a bunch of Black people. In effect, this affects everybody. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on?
It's a bill that would affect everyone. What is really going on is the legislature is trying to strip away the voting rights of people. Here's how they're trying to do it. We have been very progressive, probably due to the pandemic last year, and trying to create conditions where people can go safely and cast their vote. We believe in the security of the vote. We believe in the transparency in voting. And we want to make sure that people have a right to have a voice in their democracy if they choose. And how do you do that? You do that through the process of voting. In Harris County, we had some drive-through voting, which means that those persons, and we found out that 60% of the person who went and drove through to cast their vote, 60% of them were women. And what happens is this: you get off at about 11 o'clock at night. You know the polls are normally closed at 7. But if you have a 24-hour voting center where you can drive through, cast your vote, don't even have to get out of your car. And you can just drive on and keep voting and drive on and go home. It helps those mothers who have just picked their kids up, put them in the car. At 11 o'clock at night, they're driving home so that she can get them in the bed, but she can stop off a few minutes, cast her ballot, and keep going. Never have to wake the kids up to move out of the car and go inside of a voting facility to vote. They do not want larger urban areas to have that flexibility in voting. We had 24-hour voting. The bill that is before the Texas legislature that we walked out on and refused to allow them to strip our citizens of their voting rights would deprive people with disabilities the opportunity to participate in government. Here's how that would happen. Let's say, for instance, that they got a mail ballot, and because of their disability, they want to send it in, and you're required to sign your name on the back of it. You'll be required to put your driver's license number on it someplace, or your last 4 numbers or your social. Now, if this ballot is supposed to be a sealed ballot, how are they going to get the number, your driver's license off of that envelope inside unless they open the envelope? In addition to that, you're supposed to sign it. Many times a person with disability have acquired a driver's license or a identification card, maybe 5 years ago. What happens when they have a stroke and they have the inability to sign their name like they did 5 years ago? That ballot is going to be thrown out because they're going to have an individual person who's not skilled or trained in handwriting expertise to just look at it and say, oh, this doesn't look like Elbert's signature at all. Look at it 5 years ago and look at it now. You can hardly tell whose signature it is. It doesn't take into consideration things that may have happened that would impede the signature of that particular person. And it creates some other problems. The poll watchers. The election judge would be unable to dismiss a poll watcher, and the poll watcher is going to have the run of the precinct. They can come, they can look over your shoulder and see how you're voting. They can come close enough if you're a person who's standing there talking to yourself. So I'm wondering, should I vote for this person or this person? And they'll listen to your conversation. They can get close enough to hear what you have to say. There's there is a problem and there's a violation of some constitutional rights there. So it looks like to me that what the Republicans want to do in this legislation is to manipulate the laws so it would benefit them rather than to benefit the people of this state. And the reason that we left, in particular the reason that I left, I had to go back into history, Elbert. And I had to do some reflections. And when I did some reflections, I thought about my grandparents who reared me and how they used to work for $2 a week. And they would save pennies and nickels because they couldn't afford to save quarters. A quarter we saved was a whole lot of money back then, particularly if you had $2 that you were making, you had to pay your transportation to your job and from your job. So you're really going to end up with less than the total $2. And then they saved up enough money to be able to vote. And we didn't have the mode of transportation like we have today, where buses was running frequently, or you can grab a van from the church. Those things just didn't exist. And you had to go they had to go a long ways to cast their ballot. And they could only vote in general elections because if you were Black, you were not permitted to vote in the primaries. It was not until Thurgood Marshall won a case called Lonnie Smith versus the state of Texas that we were able to vote in the primaries in the state of Texas. And that came about sometime in the early 60s. So when I thought about my grandparents and all the things that they went through, and I had an opportunity to see the people who had been beaten because to try to get a right to vote. They had been hosed down with fire hose, water knocking them down. Dogs leached on them where they would be beaten with billy clubs, churches bombed, buses set on fire. Many people were killed just trying to get the right to vote that was guaranteed all Americans under the Constitution of the United States. When I saw those sort of things and I went back into the files of my mind in history, it was difficult for me, a person who had to buy a poll tax when I first voted, for me to sit there and remain a hostage in the House of Representatives in Texas and let those people rip away my constituents' constitutional rights to participate in government. It was wrong. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now, and I'll tell them they are wrong. So why are we here? Why are we here? Why are we looking now at a bill that want to do all these things? Just go back just a few years ago. The governor and the lieutenant governor lost Harris County. And they are for re-election next year, and they don't want a repeat of that. They don't want it to be repeated that the people of Harris County may not vote for them and they may lose Harris County in the re-election of their offices. We have people of color. Texas is now 30 million people. 84% of them are people of color. And the 15% are still trying to dominate that 84%. And we're having people of color win offices of various kinds at every level of our government. And that to them is to the 15% or the 16% that remains, that is a complete threat to them. Why would I want to pass a bill where they're going to send poll watchers there that look like the Proud Boys in a black or a brown precinct? Why would I want to do that? Just the mere presence of them is intimidating. Walking around you looking like they're going to prevent you from doing something. It's a chilling effect of people who walk in that booth to try to cast their ballots. And I'm just so disappointed that Texas has gotten to that position. And many other states across this nation have also gotten to that position, that the only way that they feel like the democracy to continue to work in this country is that they must rip away the rights of people of color to vote in America, that the people of color should not have a voice in their government if they want to. All of us want transparency. All of us want secure elections. And the Governor Abbott's own Secretary of State said the 2020 election was the most safest, secure, and transparent election. So if all of that happened, why are we here?
Exactly. What's interesting, Representative, is that same Attorney General Ken Paxton went on conservative TV and said that had it not been for him suppressing the vote in Harris County, Donald Trump would have lost the election in Texas. Isn't that sort of revealing?
I thought that was such an emboldening position to take, that he was willing to suppress the vote and publicly admit, yes, I suppressed the vote, because had I not suppressed the vote, my Lord and Savior Donald Trump would not have won.
Now, let me ask you this, because you're in Washington, D.C. with your crew. And do you see do you feel that the Democrats that you find on the national stage, are they expressing the urgency that we can all see, not only in Texas, but in other states as well?
Well, today I had an opportunity to visit with Senator Manchin from Virginia. And we could have had a nicer person to visit with, a person who was seemed to be quite understanding of our plight. And he allowed us to talk to him about what is actually happening to us here in Texas. He allowed us to tell him, he listened to what we had to say. And he didn't say it to us. He said, you know, I thought you all were going to walk in here and talk to me about the filibuster. Well, you know, we're all politicians. We know sometimes you have to work with people across the aisle. And sometimes you feel like that maybe, you know, you give them another lease on life in order to come around to what you believe would be the right approach for them to take. And we said, no, we want to talk to you about what our plight is and how you believe that you believe that you can help us. And in the end of the conversation, we talked about the Voters' Right Act that was knocked down in the Shelby versus Alabama case in 2013. We talked about the new case that the Roberts Court just ruled upon, where they literally killed all aspects of the Voters' Right Act.
VR4 and VR2, right?
Pardon me?
VR4 and VR2.
Yes, absolutely. And we told him about the need of those provisions being back in law. And then he went through an enumeration of years, and he showed us that he didn't understand it because the Congress had almost unanimously voted year after year after year in an effort to be able to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. And he couldn't understand why there was such a withdrawal from that position after they had voted for it during the time of President George W. Bush in 2000, I think, and 7. It might
right,
have been
the reauthorization.
Yes. And so he says, we talked about guardrails that he want to put on there. The bill making the national holiday for voting at the federal level, and we talk about him reinstituting, particularly for the state of Texas, the Voters' Right Act, and how we felt like that Voters' Right Act would be a protection for people to have a right to vote, who were eligible to vote, to have a say in their government if they decided that they wanted to do that. So we had, I believe, what I would have considered a very meaningful conversation with him today.
Now let's get to one last thing, and that is the practicality of what you're actually doing now. The session will end in about 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, I imagine everybody will be returning to Texas, after which the governor would immediately have another session. Will you all then go to that other session, or will you, well, I know you can't really tell a strategy, but will you, would you likely, given that you have some assurances on the federal level, would you likely go ahead and just let the bill pass? I know every Democrat will vote no on the bill, but let it pass, knowing that all the laws that are being passed that are voter oppressive laws will actually be rendered moot by the federal side?
Okay, let me uncouple those three question that you asked me. First of all, we don't know at what time that the federal law would be passed if one is passed. He just believed that if the bill was streamlined down to several things that he'd probably get enough support to put in place some safeguards that would be very helpful and beneficial. And I saw that as a way or a means of building upon something once you have something in place. And secondly, we don't know what our strategy may be at the end of this first special session. So I can't speak to that because I really don't know. I really don't know. And thirdly, the Republicans, if they have a quorum, can pass the bill at any time because they have the votes and we don't. We can't stop them. The only way that we were able to stop them this time is because of the fact that, we left. And the governor is saying that we are causing, our leaving is causing the 6 of the agencies under the, he vetoed the legislative branch of the
He did that. That's not you're doing. That's what he did.
He did that because what we did was we have a constitutional obligation to pass a budget. We passed the budget. We gave it to the governor, and he made the decision to veto the legislative branch. He made the decision to do that and to punish those people. And now he wants to say it is our problem, but it's not our problem. It's his problem because he created it.
Oh, we'll make sure to let that be known quite widely, that it is that what he's and he's bringing up the issues with teachers, et cetera, which again,
well, we voted for the teachers bill.
Right.
We voted for a teachers bill and we voted for COLA for teachers. And those bills went to the calendars committee. The calendars chairman is a Republican. And the majority of the people on the calendar committee are Republicans. They could have let that bill out at any time they wanted to and passed it.
We always know that the Republicans are not into teachers anyway, but they're not into education. They're not into any of those things. I know as the dean of the Congress, you can't quite address that, but that I can. Anyway, Representative, the last question I always ask anybody that I speak to is, what would you have liked me to ask you, or what would you like to let our audience know that we didn't get to?
Well, one of the things I like my audience to know is that we believe so much that the right to vote, as Lyndon Johnson said in 1965 on August the 6th, is the greatest right that we have, and it gives a person a right to have a say in their government. And my constituents can be assured of one thing, that I'm going to do everything I possibly can to protect their right to vote. It's not a privilege, it's a right. And it's a right that cannot be taken from them. And I don't want that right stripped away from them because some Republicans want to manipulate the laws where it would benefit them to stay in power.
There is no doubt that your district has the person who needs to be there fighting for them. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. Representative Senfronia Thompson, it's been my pleasure to have you on Politics Done Right.
Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.